Thank you so much, Dale. I think that's, yeah, I think we're good. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, Dale. We're here representing Sterling this morning, of course. Both of us Sterling boys this morning. And so, yeah, we're here from Kasama Marketing. And, you know, the really big question is, what's the magic formula that drives leads and sales to your business? Sometimes it can feel like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what might stick. That's not just that's not a way to cook good pasta, as I'm sure Greg can tell you, and it's definitely not a way to do your marketing. It's not just about the money lost, it's about the hours, the energy, those moments that could have been invested into your business. Imagine you could achieve all those hours, what you could achieve if all those hours were invested in growing your business instead of wrestling with your marketing. That's where we stepped in. Made up of our incredible team with Liv as our marketing assistant and my wife Katrina as, and along with a host of other talented freelancers, Kasama Marketing is a partner in transforming your marketing from a solo struggle into a collaborative marketing success. For 6 years, we've been the driving force behind growth for diverse businesses and charities like CDC Quinty, one of our newest clients, nationally and around the world. Our track record speaks for itself. We've designed strategies, honing messaging and creating compelling branding, websites, campaigns, and graphic design that have positively impacted our clients' better bottom line. So how do you get started? As you see in front of her, our swag is out on the tables. This is a can of custom-made artisanal spaghetti from our friend and Michelin star chef, Luca, from the Barn Chefs up in Coat Hill. Take a moment to scan the QR code on there and tell us what keeps you up at night. Then we'll reach back out to you, schedule a meeting, sit down to learn more about your business, and tailor a proposal that meets your needs. Together we'll collaborate to grow your business. So stop throwing spaghetti against the wall and partner with Kasama to elevate your business with strategic marketing today. I'm also here to introduce Ryan. Ryan was actually one of the people that encouraged us at the very beginning to start this business. It was at a Connovation event I met Ryan for the first time, and he talked about the need for businesses that don't have websites. I think at this time the stat was like 60% of businesses don't have websites. So we're like, hey, obviously there's a market there. So thank you, Ryan. Ryan has proudly served as a Federal Minister of Parliament for Bay of Quinte for over 2 years now. He is also the Shadow Cabinet Minister for Pan-Canadian Trade and Competition, where his role looks at creating competition in Canada, whether it's the high price of cell phones and internet, banking, or grocery stores. In the riding of Bay of Quinte, Brian is focused on addiction and homelessness problems in our communities, and our communities are dealing with and working with businesses who are struggling under the current rising interest rates. Life as an MP is just as busy as his family life. Ryan loves to spend time skiing with Allison and his children, Jack, Patrick, and Zoe, and playing family board games at home. Before being elected as MP, Ryan was president of Williams Hotels and a city councillor for the city of Belleville, with roles in Economic and Destination Development Committee in Belleville as chair. Ryan is past president of the Bay of Quinte Tourism and Bay of Quinte Living Council. Ryan is past chair and former founder of Quinnovation, which aimed to develop a more innovative Bay of Quinte. So, Ryan.
Well, bonjour, Belleville. Bon matin, tout le monde. That's it. For 2 years, that's all I've learned in French. It's been terrible. But it's been busy. It's a busy time. People ask me, you know, what have I learned after 2.5 years of a member of Parliament? What's the biggest lesson? It's the role of opposition. First of all, we didn't think we'd be in opposition this long. But in Ottawa, you know, the role of opposition is to hold the government to account. That's our job. That's our job in Ottawa, is to hold the government to account. And we have had no shortage of work. Just this week, of course, we're prosecuting the government on $80 million for ArriveCan app. $250 million missing since 2015 for a company. It's Ottawa's fastest growing company. They have 5 employees. And there was a reporter from La Presse who went to visit this company. It's the basement apartment of a building. You know, this is great. This is a great industry. This is great money. GC Industries got $250 million. So, of course, in Ottawa, we're there in that role prosecuting the government and filling that role of opposition. Of course, in our Canadian parliamentary Westminster parliamentary system, it is His Majesty's loyal opposition, so we take that role very, very seriously. And of course, if you're a good opposition, you won't be opposition for long. But more importantly, you know, my role, as it's been for many years, is to look at the priorities here in Quinte. And since I even became an MP, and from being an MP in Ottawa, it has never stopped. I think of my children. I have 3 children under 10 who I want to see grow up in this region and have opportunities, but it's the same as all of us who have children and grandchildren and what we're seeing from this region. And as I said, I think in a speech a year and a half ago, don't you wish we lived in some precedented times, right? These unprecedented times keep growing, and really it's really dire, and it's really concerning when we look at what's happening across the region. You know, we have a major housing crisis that continues. We have a growing problem with mental health and addictions. You know, when I was chair of tourism for 10 years and we talked about Bay of Quinte, I always take credit that the reason I'm the member and Todd is the member from Bay of Quinte is the work we did on Bay of Quinte tourism. I think we built this region up. We said we're always better together. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, to come together. And that's what we did as a region. And of course, we created Bay of Quinte Living and brought that together. And Andrew mentioned Quinnovation, which was about bringing all people together in terms of innovation and business, the same as the Chambers do every year in the Quinte Business Week. And now we need that togetherness more than ever before. We need the region to come together. You know, when we talk about what we're going to do as a government this morning, I wanted to talk about what a Pierre Poilievre government will do, but what I'm going to be working on behind the scenes because of my role as opposition. You don't see that, and you see that out front, but you don't see the work that I do behind the scenes, that our party's doing behind the scenes. Because much like unscrambling an omelet, putting toothpaste back in a tube, or my personal favorite, trying to fold a fitted sheet, our job in government is not going to be easy. It's going to be really hard, but we are ready. So I want to talk about this morning about a few things to sum it up. Our government, when we get power, will be doing 5 things. We're going to axe the tax. We're going to build the homes. We're going to fix the budget. We're going to stop the crime. Sorry, that's the French. Stop the crime. And we are going to bring our loved ones home drug-free. And we will create competition. But before I get on all of that, I do want to first this morning acknowledge for a second a great member of Parliament for our region who served from 2004 to 2015, Daryl Cram. Daryl and his government were, of course, instrumental in this region in expanding the base and at hand in funding the Quinte Sports and Wellness Centre. I know we spent a lot of time with Mark Fleur on that thing, about other things, but Daryl was especially good at loving the region he came from and the people he represented. He didn't think he owned that green seat in Ottawa. People spoke at his funeral this week about the fact that he did not feel a sense of entitlement. He didn't feel that he owned anything when he walked to the House of Commons. He felt a huge weight of responsibility. And he felt that we all do when we walk into the House of Commons. Does anyone know why the House of Commons is green? Does anyone know that? Green was supposed to signify the common people. It's the House of the Common People, the House of Commons. And back in 1215, when the Magna Carta was signed, which was the first act of democracy in the world, the royals gave the power back to the commoners. It was said that they did that in the green fields of the commoners of their land. So when we walk into the House of Commons in the UK or in Canada, it was meant that you look at the green and you're supposed to feel that weight of the common people. That the power of the House of Commons is that the people are on top. The people are on top, and that the common people are on the bottom, because when you're in the House of Commons, you serve those people and the common people. And I can tell you right now, from listening to Daryl, from knowing Daryl, and from listening from the people that knew Daryl the best, Daryl always felt that great weight of responsibility, as we all do as members of Parliament. And Daryl would have been especially happy of getting rid of excessive burdens and helping the people of this region. And I know he was a great MP, and we will all miss him. Which is why a Pierre Poilievre government, first order of business, will axe the carbon tax. And the carbon tax was, in its element, designed to hurt Canadians, to drive down emissions, but it has gone way beyond just what it was intended. When we look, and we have studies right now on what's happening across Canada, especially as inflation has gone up and interest rates have gone up. Carbon taxes have hurt businesses, have driven up grocery prices, and have hurt farmers. Saskatchewan, this week, yesterday, announced a report where, and this was following the Atlantic provinces that had their carbon tax axed off of home heating. Saskatchewan decided to stop collecting taxes on natural gas, propane, and heating oil in January, and that province inflation rate fell by 0.8% in 1 month. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the example of how carbon tax adds to inflation. And for the kicker for local business, Ottawa is sitting right now on $2.5 billion in carbon tax rebates owed to the small businesses, and they've been collecting that since 2019. They won't release that money. It's so bad now that the CFIB did a study, and 85% of businesses, small businesses, now oppose the carbon tax. To make matters worse, most small firms will be ineligible for the federal fuel charge proceeds return program. So a government, and when we come in, we will axe the tax, and we're going to return $2.5 billion back to small businesses. When we look at what we do for the government, we will then grow technology over taxes in Canada to drive emissions while helping create paychecks and competition in Canada. We have great, amazing companies and firms across Canada creating great green energy, carbon capture, tidal wave energy. We look at what our place in the world, and Canada needs to be providing that energy and to ensure we provide that technology to solve that for the world. One of the greatest technologies that we have in Canada is hydrogen. The other one is fusion, and there's a great company called General Fusion on the West Coast providing that technology. We have to ensure Canadian companies grow that technology and we sell that to the rest of the world. Canada can lead that. If there's ever a crisis or emergency in this country, it's our housing crisis. First of all, I'm going to give a big credit to Neil Ellis and to Belleville City Council. As much as it's controversial, declaring an emergency 2 weeks ago on the crisis of overdoses and addictions is hard. It was a hard decision, but it was the right decision. And the reason was, yeah, this is happening across Canada. Yes, we have a major homeless and housing crisis across Canada. Yeah, we have overdose crises across Canada, not so much as we saw in the 2 episodes over a short period of time. But if we don't take it seriously, if we don't declare this as emergencies, we are not going to be able to take care of what really ails us and any sort of fast expediency. It's a crisis. Every part of this is an absolute crisis, and we see it across all of our supports and first responders across the region. We have major fatigue, compassion fatigue setting in. We have less people that want to become nurses, and if they are nurses, that want to stay in the profession. We have less people who want to be police officers or first responders because they see the stress that it's in. And I want to give a big round of applause. I know some of them are here today, and our police are here today, some of the fire department, because they do such an important job. When we talk about what we're doing when we declare this as a crisis, is we're getting the support for them. They are desperately crying for the support. They need to have the assistance. They need to ensure that they're getting help for compassion fatigue, but also to ensure that they get the resources they need to do their jobs. And that's why I commend the City of Belleville for doing what they did. And of course, that's just not, it's not like when, I think if anyone's seen The Office and Michael Scott says, well, I just declare bankruptcy and everything's all settled, right? Back to declare bankruptcy! By declaring an emergency, it doesn't solve it right away. It's just the beginning of a lot of work, but more importantly, it's put an issue and a spotlight on what the work needs to be. And I sat in the room last week, and Mr. Tabola was here, and we had all of our support staff for mental health and addictions in the room, and I'll tell you right now, they know what we need to do, but we need to put that all together and we need to get the work done, and it's not going to be easy. It's not as simple as where housing is concerned, just saying we're going to build homes and we're done with that, right? We have major issues, and I sat on the Belleville Planning Council. I saw firsthand the roadblocks that occur anytime any element of housing wants to come into the city, but in the region. And let's face it, folks, and I've talked about this before, the biggest problem we have is NIMBYism. Like, it's inherited in our brains since we had to live a cave, and we don't share a cave with anyone else. But I've seen the most altruistic people in our region come forth and say, I don't want that housing development around me. It's the biggest problem we have. And when it comes to housing, Of course, the major issue is that we are bringing way more people in to this country than we're building homes. Last year we brought 1.2 million people into the country. We only built 230,000 homes. That was almost 20% less homes than we built the year prior. The major hurdles for home builders right now is they're building homes that they designed 6 years ago. That's how long it takes to get through planning. And these home builders now are sitting on homes that they can't sell because of high interest rates and high inflation. And so we're not building homes. Isn't that the travesty? We need more homes than anyone else. We have less homes per capita in the whole G7 than any of those nations combined. We need 3.5 million homes today just to reach the median of houses built for the G7. And it's not just one home. It's not just the homes for anyone that can afford an $800,000 home right now. It's all types of homes. And I talk very, very confidently about what this region's actually been doing compared to the rest of the country. I know Bob Christ was here from Grayson, but I talk about Grayson and Parliament all the time, and I think it's just a great thing. Grayson, because of the shelter, sure, and the shelter is great to have, but it's Shiloh House. It's transitional housing. When we talk about trying to help people with mental health and addictions, we start with housing, but we also talk about that transitional housing because it's getting people off the street and then into support programs that help them get housed, help them keep employment, and help them be part of the community again. And that is the whole element that the whole country is missing with housing. And once you get from transitional housing, the next part of housing we need is affordable market rents. If you have an average rent in Canada right now of $2,600, just think about that for a moment. Average rental for people who are making minimum wage, it is unaffordable. People with minimum wage can barely afford a $1,500 apartment. $2,600 is their average. So we need massive new supply of rental. I'm a hotelier. I know that when you build a new hotel and you own a hotel, your rates go down 20%, your occupancy goes down 20%, and you're able to then fill that up. My banker's here and he's saying he knows that. He's seen that happen before. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to take when it comes to housing in Canada. Of course, more Shiloh houses, more transitional housing, more wraparound supports for those that need it, more mental health, addictions counseling, but also it's going to take a massive influx of rental to solve the housing crisis in Canada. We also want to talk about what's happened with the announcements with Loyalist College, of course, but all colleges, when we have now caps on international students. Let's make this very clear. The international students in Belleville have been nothing but good for this whole region. You look at the fact that when we look at what's just happening at Loyalist and those students, and we look at the culture, when we look at Diwali, and we have so many Navratri and so many great celebrations here that we never had in Belleville before. I was chair of Bay Quinte Living, and one of the things we developed, I think it was 10 years ago now, was Quinte's first immigration portal. And we thought that would be great. This is going to be so easy to bring immigration into Belleville, into Bay Quinte. It wasn't. Immigration is extremely hard because when we had immigration 10 years ago, the Torontos, the Vancouvers, the Montreals, they figured out, which we figured out lately, that having people come to your city is a great thing. It's good for our youth retention, it's good for culture, and it was really hard for Belleville and Bay Quinte to bring immigration to the area. And so Loyalist College solved it, and the government solved it, inadvertently, in some ways. They created programs that allowed international students to fill quotas, but at the same time, what it did, and I know Chris King's here, it filled our labor quotas. And that's the biggest thing that we were missing. It made sure that we had workers to the region. It was all the greatest things that we could have do it. And what happened at the end, because of some colleges like Conestoga, which was almost all international students, when we didn't fulfill the obligations as a society to build more homes, and we brought the people in without trying to build those homes, we created the problem, of course, where rents have gone way up. So inadvertently, it's hurting Loyalist College, and that's really a bad thing right now because it's also going to hurt our labor force. To solve that, well, it's a big issue because in Canada we have to build homes and we have to build it quickly. Part of it might be, and I've talked before, ensuring that we look at more residence spaces but more affordable market rent for all people across the country. The biggest thing with housing is really trying to find ways to incentivize builders to build rental, purpose-built rental, but also rental as a whole. If we flood the supply of Canada with rental properties, at the end of the day, rents will go down. And the big example for that where it did happen was in Toronto during COVID. During COVID, Rents went down in Toronto over 50% because people left Toronto. 50,000 people left Toronto during COVID, and they came to Belleville, and they went to Atlantic Canada, and they went everywhere they could work remotely. But rents went down because the population went down because they had more supply. So the answer to fix that problem is more supply to make sure it's fixed, but also to make sure that people and programs like Grace Inn get the support they need, and we of course work around that. We talk about the budget. I'm going to think this is probably, of course, because it's not the biggest crisis right now, it's going to be the biggest threat to Canada and to Canada's future right now. We have a budget right now. Yesterday there was an announcement. The government's going to spend $75 billion more than they thought they would. They do an economic update every fall and every spring. $75 billion, because the cost of inflation is driving up the cost of government. That's a big deal. And we see that south of the border, and we've seen that for years. But the difference between Canada and the US is that the US is growing its economy 5 times faster than Canada's right now. When we look at revenues, we look at what we're trying to generate, look at the jobs, we look at GDP, we look at revenues for the government. The fact that that economy to the south is growing 5 times us is really bad news for Canada, because that spells higher costs for government. And when we have higher costs for government, which already been proven, that means higher and persistent inflation. We have higher and persistent inflation. The Bank of Canada has to hold or raise, shutter, interest rates any further. And what's happening with that is we're seeing, and I mentioned it last week in the House of Commons, Cascades closing in Quinte West, even though some might say, well, it was inevitable, it's a 100-year-old factory. My father was mayor of Quinte West 10 years ago when they had some union issues, and Chris will talk about the story. It was the only time that a union had stood up to the company, and the company had said we're going to close the factory. And my father talked to the union leader, and they worked out a deal, and they reopened that factory because whatever it costs, right? But this time it had nothing to do with the union, nothing to do with the factory. It was the fact that interest rates and costs of doing business are so high right now, factories and companies are consolidating, and they're getting tighter. And we saw that in the last 4 months. We've had announcements like Rona cutting 300 jobs. The Rona here in Belleville, when they said, I remember talking to the company owner when they were merging, they bought the 2 stores, he said, we're going to keep the one as a lumber yard. Well, sure enough, you know, a month later they shut the one store to the other. TE has just slashed 4,000 jobs. Canadian Tire just announced 68% drop in their economic numbers because of the drop in sales, and they've cut 3% of their workforce. We're seeing it across Canada, and I can tell you folks, you know, it's not good news. There is an economic storm ahead, and you know, the cupboard is bare. The Canadian household debt in Canada is the most concerning. It's the highest in the G7. It's now over 110% of GDP. So household debt, of course, credit cards, but also mortgages. You know, when we look at what's happening this year when it comes to mortgage renewals, those of you in the mortgage business or in real estate, 60% of Canadians this year or next year will renew their fixed mortgages. And those mortgages are all right now at 1.8 to 2.3%. And they'll be renewing at 5.5 to 7.8%, which is going to cost the average family $1,700 more per month. And what do you do when you take $1,700 per month out of the average family in Canada, out of the economy? Right? That's going to have a profound effect on spending habits, on what people have to spend, the decisions they have to make on children's sports and the grocery store and more. So, you know, what we're going to find in our policy is very simple. We're going to find $1 in spending for $1 in savings. But I'll tell you right now, we're going to have a really tough time when it comes to trying to balance this budget, raise revenues up, and make sure that we get inflation, of course, interest rates down. We want to stop the crime. Stopper the crime in French. This is major concerning, and this is really concerning in Canada right now. When we talk about crime, extortion is up 218% in Canada. 218%. Violent crime is up 39%. Car thefts are up 300% in Toronto alone. You know, car theft claims are up 329% in the first half of 2023, with $700 million in losses. And it costs you. The Insurance Board of Canada estimates the cost of driver in Canada an extra $130 a year. I'm part of the club right now that just got nailed another $500 because of the vehicle I drive, and my wife and I both have that. You know, unless you upgrade your own auto theft system, this is just something that's happening across Canada. And it's the same when we talk about car theft as it is with the drug problem we have in Canada. Our ports are the major issue. Both Montreal and Vancouver only have, we've been talking about all week in Parliament, but they only have about 2 working scanners to scan equipment. And we don't have the authorities or the boots on the ground in these ports to look even under the boats. And what's happening is right now, drugs are being smuggled, they're being attached to intake systems of these ships when they come into ports. Cars are just being put onto containers and being shipped out of the country. One story we had from a man in Brampton was that he put an air tag in his vehicle and it got stolen, and he saw that it was stolen, and he went down to the shipping yard where his car was in a container, and he was talking to the security. He said, "My car's in this container." Well, no, they gave him a $500 fine for trespassing and told him to get out of there. He then found in the air tag, the car ended up in the Vancouver port, and then the next time he knew it was in Saudi Arabia. The next week, the same guy was in his house, and his second car was being stolen, and he called the police, and they said, "You know, we're so sorry, we have 75 calls ahead of you, we're not going to get there." Right? Because crime is up so much. And at the end of the day, his other car he watched get stolen, and it's out of the country. You know, we are massively failing getting the resources to our police so they can do our jobs. When we had a drug bust last week, and congratulations for great work, Belleville Police, for doing the work they do. One of the perpetrators had 15 priors on his record. So he was allowed to get off. He was 15 times arrested. Is that right, 15?
I believe so.
Yes, and then back on the streets. In BC alone, we've been tracking this, 200 frequent offenders were collectively responsible for 11,600 confrontations with the police. 200. So what happened years ago? We had the bills C5 and C75, and this is federal. C75 allowed what we call catch and release. It diminished the amount that we could put people on and put them in jail, and allowed people to get off on bail. So what it allowed for the police is that it allowed these offenders to commit a crime, to go out and they're released on bail. The police have done their job. They get back out, and then they can commit another crime either the next morning or a few days later. When this was in Vancouver and they tracked it, there were 60 offenders that had at least 5,000 crimes. And they kept getting in and out and in and out. C5 allowed these offenders to serve house arrest. So maybe they have an ankle bracelet on, but most times they're just there. They can just walk out their door and commit another crime. We need to end the revolving door of catch and release. We have to give the police back the tools to put people away and keep them away. If we have repeat violent offenders who are violent, who deal drugs, who steal cars, who have auto theft, our government will reinstitute mandatory minimum sentences, revoke the option for house arrest for violent criminals, and we're going to repeal C75 and C5 and restore jail, not bail, for repeat offenders. And it includes the drug crimes. For drugs, we'll bring our loved ones home drug-free. And our government's approach to addiction policy in Canada is a big one. It's come to a head, and enough is enough. Both our first responders and for the public, we have compassion fatigue, and there's no end in sight. And this can't be normalized. It isn't the Belleville we grew up in. It isn't the Canada we grew up in. We've had a rapid increase in opiate-related deaths in Canada, the massive spike in meth use driving rural crime, deadly fentanyl, and the overdose of alcohol. Belleville's overdose epidemic is front and center in Canada, not because it's alone, but because the nation is looking to how the province and federal governments will solve it. The municipality is taking responsibility in its own hand, and that shows leadership. The bridge will get done, and it will be a much-needed center for our growing homeless. Federally, we need to give the tools to police to put bad guys away and stop the flow of illicit, often deadly drugs into our regions. Provincially, we need the province to step up. Minister Chabola was here Friday. He wants to see a business case, and I'm confident we will see leadership in the region to get it done. Altogether, if done right, we will get the drugs off of the street. But that doesn't mean treating people struggling with addiction like criminals. We have to work on compassionate solutions that help people struggling with addiction take back control of their lives. People struggling with addiction belong in treatment, not prison. Prison should be for violent reoffenders and drug lords who profit off these deadly, life-destroying substances. For nearly a century, recovery has been recognized as the best solution for addiction, but it has been absent because our current resources are drained. But as we've seen in BC and in Belleville, what happens if we don't build these supports? Governments across Canada should be doing everything possible to build and support effective systems of addictions care. We require compassionate intervention that's built around treatment and recovery programs that break addictions altogether. And people with addictions, let's face it, they're not bad people. They're sick people who deserve our care and respect. But tolerating and not normalizing drug use needs to end. We need to be tougher with normalized detox and recovery so we can bring our loved ones home. And I want to talk about what I've been doing in my file for the last year. You know, Canada has a monopoly problem. You know, we have grocery stores that charge some of the highest fees. We have banks that charge fees. You know, in the UK, you pay $0 for checking, $0 for transactional fees, and $0 for overdraft fees. You know, we have cell phone bills that are the highest in the world, of 128 telecommunication carriers in 64 countries. Rogers, Telus, and Bell are number 1, number 2, and number 3 for priciest cell phone carriers in the world. For internet, pretty much the same. If you're in rural Canada right now, the best internet you can get is from Starlink, which is Elon Musk. Of course, but we only have, that's an American company. We have 2 airlines in Canada that control 87% of the flights. Good luck right now getting direct flights from most of our Canadian cities. Either WestJet or Air Canada are now only serving them solely. They're not competing with each other. That's because of lack of competition, except for Vancouver. Right now you can get a flight, and this is real competition with Flair or Lynx Airlines from Toronto, Vancouver, round trip $185, which is probably why Flair is going under. And right now there's a deal happening between Flair and Lynx to get together, which we support because that is competition. But the kicker of that wasn't just those 2 airlines giving a cheaper price. It's that Air Canada was offering $385 round trip from Toronto to Vancouver. So that's the power of competition when you get real competition. But if you want to fly anywhere else in this country, good luck. 2 airlines, and it's really hard to get flights. And beer, isn't it a travesty in Canada? We have a monopoly of beer. We have 2 companies that own 90%, and none of them are owned by Canadians. Both American, European beer companies, and it's something we're paying the highest for. Everyone knows the board game. We know Monopoly. You know that Monopoly was meant to show the perils of property ownership in the hands of a very few, right? We all played that, and let's think about it for a moment. When you own Boardwalk and Park Place and you own them together, what happened to rent? Rent doubled right away, right? You got to jack the rate up, you put a hotel on it, you're doing really well. But the whole point of Monopoly was created 100 years ago, was to show what happens when property became into the hands of very rural. And we live it in Canada right now. Canada, the board game, Canada Monopoly game, well, it's a little worse. We have CIBC, and you have RBC and TD, and then you have WestJet and Air Canada, and you have InBev and Coors. And when you spin the roll of the dice, it feels like you pay $200 every time you pass go. We've become synonymous with Monopoly, the board game. Many buyers but few sellers. And it comes from even what we talk about in the economy. It's not really even real capitalism when we have only a few sellers selling to many buyers. This comes all the way back from a book written in 1776 from Adam Smith called The Wealth of Nations. The Wealth of Nations, everyone read this so they know about it? They talked about the invisible hand. So the visible hand is many buyers and many sellers, and that's how you dictate price. When you have a lot of sellers, prices go down. Same as I talked about earlier with hotel rooms and with apartment buildings. At the same problem, it's also about labor as well, though. And this has been the problem with our monopoly problem. When you have few sellers, when you have few employers to choose from, you also drive wages down. And because of our monopoly problem in Canada, wages are down about 25% from where they could be. And when we talk about what we want to do for Canada and what we want to do for Canadians, we're going to talk about solving that monopoly problem. The grocery problem is one of the biggest examples. In 1986, we had 6 companies, 6 Canadian companies that provided groceries for Canadians. And I think it even was 8 at one point. So we had A&P, right before Metro, we had Farm Boy came along, we had Longo's, of course a connection here at Belleville, but now we only have 3. And that's because of consolidation. Even in the last 8 years, 9 years, we've had Loblaws buy Shoppers Drug Mart. We've had Sobeys buy Farm Boy. Sobeys bought Longo's. And now we only have Metro, Sobeys, and Loblaws as 3 Canadian grocery store companies in Canada, with 2 Americans, Walmart and Costco, that have come in to the market. And the result of that has been dominance by these grocery industries. And we just looked at it yesterday. Loblaws just announced that they're going to open 40 new stores. They just came to committee 2 months ago to Parliament to say they're out of money. They're not making any more money. Here's $2 billion. We're going to open 40 new stores because they have a massive chokehold on Canadian groceries. When we look at cell phone bills, and we look at, of course, the three companies. And I had Mr. Pelado from Videotron in last week to committee, but we're going to have Rogers in next Wednesday. And the question is, it's not about cell phones themselves. In 2015, everyone used a cell phone and they used text. What the difference has been since 2015 to today is now on your cell phone you have your doorbell camera. You have, of course, Spotify. You have your banking apps. I'm not going to mention social media. Does anyone know how many hours the average Canadian spends on social media now? It'd be surprising. It's about 6 hours a day. Isn't it crazy? But these are the things that we rely on. Of course, we talk to our loved ones. We use FaceTime. But data in Canada has tripled in price. And data we use has tripled in use. So these companies are making hand over fist over data. Of course, the other thing we talk about is bank fees. But here's the solutions. And here's what I've been working on for that. Number one, we're going to create more Canadian grocery stores. Well, so the biggest thing with that was we're probably going to have to look at breaking up some elements of Loblaws. We're going to be looking at how the wholesale market works. So we're going to be looking at what happens in small towns. A lot of times the Walmart model is the Walmart would come in, drop their prices, make sure that everyone else was out, and then they dominate the market. We're looking at ways that when a new Loblaws comes into town, they can't stop other grocery stores or other boutiques from opening around it, called covenant laws. We're going to ensure that we have more Canadian wholesalers and more food processors that can develop Canadian food to get into not just here in this country, but outside the country as a whole. For cell phones, we're going to look at what's happened in Australia, where they bring massive competition called MVNOs into the market. So in Australia, they have 60 MVNOs that compete for your business, and when these MVNOs come in, prices have dropped so that Australians pay 1/3 what Canadians do for cell phones. It's the same with our banking industry. My Consumer-Led Banking Act right now, which is in front of Parliament, we're debating it, is open banking. And open banking is bringing massive competitors to compete with banks. And that's called FinTech, financial tech industries. We have about 600 in Canada right now. And the only thing open banking does is it makes the banks have to share your financial data on your consent. It's called an API, but it's only a simple legislation to say when you ask for your data from the bank and the data to give to another company, the bank will have to give it to them. Whereas right now, the banks don't. The banks own your data. And so when you want to go and be banked by another institution, if someone else has to take risk on you, right now you can't unless you share your username or your password or your safe word with those institutions. And this legislation is going to do just that. And with that, in the wings, it's not just banks. It's a lot of financial applications. It's institutions that will help you with your budgeting. Anyone use Intuit here? Intuit is a financial tech organization. They give that technology, they give the services, and the solutions, of course, will be more competition. Internet, same thing. Think of internet and cell phones like a big jar that has 3 rocks in it. And if you take a bunch of little stones and you fill that jar, that's what we're doing when we're having more what's called ISP companies. KOS Kingston, there's a group here, another one in county called Tenacity, but allowing small internet companies to fulfill internet to rural Canadians across Canada. Right now, over 60% of rural Canadians don't have high-speed internet. And that's including Bay of Quinte, but that's 7.5 million Canadians, allowing more competition to come in, making the big companies, this is what Bell's in court right now for, and why they're saying they slash jobs. They're having it hard with the decisions that the CRTC has had to make them share their spectrum or their wholesale rates or their data. That's what's going to happen if we allow more ISPs in, more competition. Your rates for internet are going to go down, your banking fees are going to go down, your cell phone bills are going to go down, your grocery prices are going to go down. The solution to inflation is to produce more of the stuff money buys. Competition creates companies who compete to drive prices down, but also to provide big paychecks for Canadians. If we create competition, Canadians will win. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just make this clear, I'll end on this. We live in the greatest region and the greatest country in the world. I got in politics because I knew the potential of this region, of this country, and to make things better for the world, for our children, for my children, for all our children when they grow up. That's the whole of it. That's everything. You know, things are bad right now. Things are terrible. We're entering into a storm. We know we've got a lot of big problems to solve. We know we have to work together. But ladies and gentlemen, things will get better. The sun rises, and with a little bit of hope and hard work, we will turn things around. I even have hope for my French. It's about taking care of our home, Bay of Quinte, a place we all share, where we all come to, that's worth taking care of, a place we all love, a place where it's people we love, a place where our children hope to call home when they get older. This is a place that I call my home. It's your home, it's our home. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dale. I think that's, yeah, I think we're good. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, Dale. We're here representing Sterling this morning, of course. Both of us Sterling boys this morning. And so, yeah, we're here from Kasama Marketing. And, you know, the really big question is, what's the magic formula that drives leads and sales to your business? Sometimes it can feel like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what might stick.